by and large, how we receive information about our environment, about sustainability, about climate change. We always receive it as something that's like spoken about as if it's an isolated thing, which it's not, and that it's got so much heavy negativeness to it that it's something that's a dreaded problem, intractable, awful. And even there's a kind of a solution to it. They don't tend to talk about the solution as if it's like a great thing. They're like, well, this might work, but remember, it's all bad, right? And here's the thing that I had no idea about until I've been working on this project, and then to have a little self-reflection about it. The work of trying to solve these issues is fun and joyous. You meet all kinds of people. You go out, you have adventures, you laugh, you're like joking, you get dirty, you have to do laundry, and then you go get beers with people. It is what humans are about. It is the best part of us. It is the most fun I've had my whole freaking life.
Hello and welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Linda Ulrich, and you may know if you listen regularly that I'm also the co-founder of a big global website that does positive news for curious people called the Goodness Exchange. We are over there just trying to shine a light on what's right with the world. Okay, we're going to start today with another guest who is doing something extraordinary that is changing our shared future. And as usual, the negative news cycle and social media can't seem to send us very much that's positive, so a lot of people wouldn't know about the work of artist John Sabraw. John Sabraw is an Ohio University professor of art who collaborated with a colleague in the environmental engineering department on an ingenious project that we discovered at the Goodness Exchange and celebrated many years ago when these guys were just starting out. I think they had a little polluted stream and a 40 by 40 patch they were testing their ideas on. But now this idea has expanded into something remarkable. They've actually created a process that has the potential to clean up over 1,300 miles of polluted streams in the state of Ohio alone. It's a wonder that we like to call pollution to paint, and you're going to understand why we call it that very soon, because I'm going to turn John loose to explain the process. There are hundreds of sites in the state of Ohio that have severe pollution in the streams and the watershed because of strip mining way back when, and now the streams run amazing hues of color, which is toxic waste. This project is one of the best win-win solutions we have ever come across at the Goodness Exchange. There's just like no downside to this. It's been so important that John's artwork and the process itself has been celebrated by TED, the Smithsonian, at the UN, in Business Insider and Time Magazine. So we want to celebrate this too, and I can't wait to talk about what progress has been made with John. The bottom line is that these are folks who have seen a problem, came up with a solution, and the world is actually churning along to help them get there. Right now, you can get this paint produced from toxic waste in small tubes, but hopefully in another 5 years, we will be seeing the start of an entire new industry around cleaning up these toxic waste sites related to this pollution to paint, and miles of watersheds will be restored. So welcome, John Sabraw.
Thank you, Linda. It is lovely to connect again. It has been a number of years, hasn't it?
I think it was 2015 when we first...
I think you're right. Yeah. We were just working towards the Kickstarter campaign at that point, if I remember correctly.
And that's another thing that I wanted to point out to people that, you know, we've been celebrating, we have a knack for discovering people when they're small, like your project was at that time. And gosh, I could spend the rest of my career going back to people we saw at that stage who actually made it through the pipeline, and you're where you are today.
Yeah. It's amazing. And it's something that I kind of reflect on a lot more now. Because we're in the final stages of this thing, and that it seems, at the time, it seemed almost impossible to be at the stage that we're at now. So it's pretty exciting.
Okay. So give us a little, most people wouldn't know. I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Illinois, and I drove through Ohio all the time because my husband played basketball at the University of Kentucky. So we know that region really well. Yeah. And I knew about the mining situation in Ohio, but there's a lot of people who wouldn't realize what we're talking about here. So give us a picture of the problem, kind of the history, and then what sits there today that we're left with.
Sure, that's probably a very good place to begin. So thanks for that. Essentially, it kind of comes down to the industrial era, right? This comes down to when we were like, well, we can generate a lot of electricity, we can generate power, and in Ohio, like a lot of places in Appalachia, they discovered coal, and they discovered here, particularly in the southeast region, that's where most of the coal deposits are here. That this stuff is everywhere here. It's bituminous in this region. And so what they did is they used two different methods to extract the coal. And this is in the early 20th century, a little bit late 19th, but early 20th century. As you mentioned, there is some mountaintop removal, or strip mining as it's called, where they scrape the soils away, right, to expose the coal and then bring it out. And then the other method is underground mining. And around here, a lot of the underground mining they did to get at the coal was they would, take the coal out of a large space of room downstairs. Downstairs. That's cool. Downstairs underneath the mountain, when you go down the stairs. But they would leave these pillars of coal so that it wouldn't collapse on them. So that's called room and pillar. Pillars keep it from collapsing. The room is like where they would extract the coal. The thing is that there were no laws and no rules in place of what they had to do as a mining company. And so at that time, they just, when the coal ran out, walked away. That's it, right? And the problem with that, I know, right? Is to throw up your hands and like, really? And the truth is really.
What?
All over the world, right? This is until the 1972 Clean Water Act, nobody had to do anything. They were like, well, we're done there. Bye, So that, of course, leaves just hundreds and hundreds of miles of connected rooms and tunnels under the mountains, under the ground, that fill with water because it's below the water table, right? And so when it fills with water, then by mining, you exposed all of these rock surfaces that have been buried for 300 million years, along with the trees that created the coal. Very cool story that the trees back then, when they fell over, they had lignin in them, which allowed them to grow really tall, and the bacteria didn't eat that lignin at that time. So that's how come they actually became coal. So we're not like making new coal. Just in case people think that trees are going to fall over and make new coal, we're not making any new coal because the bacteria evolved to eat the trees, right? So the water, that has oxygen in it, has other things in it, and that comes in contact with those rock surfaces. Around here, a lot of those surfaces have iron, and they also have pyrite. Pyrite is iron and sulfur. So the oxygen begins to dissolve the sulfur. The sulfur in the water becomes sulfuric acid. The sulfuric acid further leaches the iron, and you end up with a water that has tremendous amounts of acidity to it, pH of 2, pH of 4, but it also has huge quantities of dissolved iron in it. And eventually, if anybody who owns a house or has a yard or anything else, water's going to find a way. It's just going to find a way. So eventually, somewhere there's a weak spot, and that water that was in that mine for all those years will find its way out, flow into streams. And at that point, that's when we have a real pollution issue, right? That pollution issue is that the water's acidic. So when it comes out, you can't have aquatic life living in it. There's a few strains of bacteria that love an acid environment, but like your regular fish and insects and things like that, frogs, they're not going to be in it.
Just to remind people of their high school chemistry, the pH scale goes from 0 to 14, 7 being neutral. I think most groundwater is just a smidge on the side of positive.
Yeah.
7. But to be down around 2 is down around white vinegar, isn't it?
It is. It's it's fish trying to live in lemonade,
Wow.
Not going to happen. And if you're in there with your hands, it'll really, your hands will crack. It gets very, the water ain't right when you're in there.
This is just flowing through the forests and the streams and meadows and probably into our water wells and everything else.
Yeah, it does.
Wow. Okay.
It does. And the interesting thing is that this acidic water, when it first comes out, it's crystal clear. You're like, wow, I should drink this. It looks like a fresh stream. But within a very short distance, the sunlight and further oxygen in the atmosphere mix with that water, and that causes the dissolved iron, to become iron oxide, or technically iron oxyhydroxide. And then that is a full visible orange and yellowish, reddish particle of iron metal. And so once that's formed, it settles to the bottom of the streams.
Not unlike the colors behind you. I was remarking about your beautiful background. I mean, John is a major artist. Yes, and there behind him is the color of the streams that you will see in the pictures. We're going to get some photos to put in the background on this episode, and you will see the streams in Ohio are about like that yellow-orange painting that you see behind him.
Good visual, a good observation. That is right there. That is our acid mine drainage pigment on campus. It's, so when that iron coats the stream beds, then that's also further, it debilitates breeding ground for things. So in some places, these are very, very small. Like you can just see it kind of bubbling out in a little bit. So some of those things, there's passive methodologies to treat that pollution. You can create some kind of like, mitigating wetland areas if it's small and things like that, and just kind of maintain it periodically. But for some of the pollution sites, there's two in particular that we deal with very locally here. They're within 15 minutes and 30 minutes of here. Those are leaching millions of gallons a day. This is a gusher coming out. And the one, which is the number one priority pollution site for acid mine drainage pollution in the state of Ohio, it's in a place called True Town, 15 minutes north of here. That one site alone, which came out in about 1983, they think, that one burst out, and that's 1.5 million gallons of acid mine drainage pollution every single day. Every day, right? I know,
sulfuric
me too.
acid, totally. Just like sulfuric acid pouring out every single day.
And so obviously that's not good. That pollution connects directly with Sunday Creek, which is actually, it's a pretty big creek. It's like a small river. And it kills it for the next 7 miles until it reaches a much larger body of water that can actually dilute it a bit. And that's really where we're concentrating our efforts.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
So that gives people kind of a snapshot of what the problem is. Give us a little snapshot of the potential before we dive in deep. This is iron oxide. If people have ever bought paints, those are some of the most expensive colors that use iron. I'm an artist too. So carry on. Tell us about the potential now.
Okay. Thank you. Because this is a good segue. So I am not an Ohioan. I came here for a job being an art professor at Ohio University, which is, a really lucky and privileged position to have. And I was working in a lot of other projects, which we can get to in our next 12 podcasts that we do together, Linda. And all of those were kind of talking around ideas of sustainability and environmental concerns and that kind of stuff. But I felt at the time that I wasn't making like a big enough impact. And my daughter was very young and I was feeling very fatherly responsibly, about like her future and everything else, right? And so I actually learned about my local environment through a great group of environmental studies faculty here at Ohio University. They formed this little group called the Kana Group, which is a local indigenous tribe. And they showed us all these different things that are happening locally. And they took me to my first acid mine drainage site, right? And I'll tell you something, you can smell it before you see it. It is so much sulfur that you feel like you're almost walking into Hades, And you're just like, what is, you can't see anything yet, but you're like, what is that smell? Like something's gone off here, right? And then when you go see it, they are stunningly bright orange, these streams. Bright orange. Like, your best jack-o'-lantern you ever had since we're almost to October. Yes, it's that kind of color. So I asked, and they did the educational, information, just like what I related to you. And I was like, iron oxides, like, just like you. I'm like, hey, I got a lot of iron oxides I paint with. Can I make paint out of this? Because I just thought it would be good, since I was interested in ecology and, sustainability, to do something that would have a relationship with it. Nobody knew if I could. Got a jar, scooped up some of this iron oxide sludge off the bottom of the stream, went back to my studio, and failed to make a paint. It was quite terrible. It turned into concrete. It turned brown. I was like, this is not really what I wanted. I wanted something that was a little, what's going on? So I thought, well, definitely not one of my best ideas. And I don't know, this is a fate thing. We can talk about spirituality and interconnecting things, Linda. But it was a very short time after that failure that one of Professor Riefler's graduate students reached out to me and said, my professor needs help from an artist. Do you want to meet with him? I said, okay, yeah, sure, because we knew each other. And then that's the first time I met Professor Guy Riefler. And he explained that he was trying to make a pigment out of this iron oxide. And I was like, whoa, wait, what? Like, that's what I was trying to do. And I was like, it's terrible. And he goes, yeah, I'm having some luck, but I don't know how to make the quality of what a pigment needs to be on the market, right? Like, he knows the chemistry. He's a chemist. He's a very smart guy. And so I was like, yeah. And that is when we both were like, oh yeah, maybe what we needed to do was look at it from two different perspectives and experiences to solve the problem rather than just one and one. And so what we've been doing ever since then, and we think we're trying to even remember, but we think it was 2009, 2010 when we first had coffee till now, which is like, I don't even want to think about how many years later. The solution is that you can obviously, and you mentioned your basic chemistry, so this is a good segue, is that if it's acidic and it's a pH of 2, then, you can add a base to it, something that's a pH of, 9 or 10 or 11, right? Bring it back to, like you said, 7, the neutral. So that's something you can do. And when you do that in very, very careful steps, you can get the dissolved iron to precipitate out of the water into something that you can start to shape, not control, let me be careful here, shape the kind of color and kind of pigment that you get out of it. So after many years of just like very bad versions, we have this product now out of it that is an iron oxide pigment that really is a very close replication of things that are on the market already, most of which come from China and imported. And so we believe that we can find the right market for it, sell it, and make enough money from selling it to pay for the actual daily operation of the plant and for the jobs that will be there, and then also somehow have a small profit from it that we can use to implement this process to clean up more streams. That's where we're at.
Okay. Now, I remember in our pre-call, because John and I connected again after, 7 or 8 years. And it was just like talking to an old friend. That was so fun. Makes me a little teary-eyed, by the way, because I am so happy for your success and for what your success points to for all of us, because you've got this one little corner of problem and solution, but the whole world is full of people like you who are staying at it, who can see the potential and they stay at it. They just don't give up. So I thank you for that. But one thing I remember you talked about in the pre-call that I'd love for you to share is this. We're not talking about a little artist paints here. We're talking about a major industry and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in this pigment is very, very valuable. And we're importing most of it in the United States, right?
That is correct. The iron oxide industry in the United States alone is, I think, on the order of about 250,000 metric tons a year.
Wow.
Yeah. And we import 80+% of that from China and a small amount from Europe. The pigment that we import from China comes generally from processes that are not sustainable, that are not environmentally friendly, in addition to which, of course, giant ships crossing the ocean is a huge polluter and all that. So our plant alone, the one that we're building right now, that will treat the 1.5 million gallons of pollution every day. And that means that we will generate every single day around 7,000 pounds of iron oxide pigment every single day for the next, 500 years.
Oh my gosh.
So that's over 2 million pounds of iron oxide pigment sustainably sourced and produced every single year.
And solving a problem and creating jobs. Yeah. It's just a win all the way around. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is.
That's incredible. It is. Because I don't think, and again, this isn't for, artists paint. This pigment is used very, like, in all kinds of things, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we use it in cosmetics. We use it in pharmaceuticals. We use it in food supplements for human and supplements for livestock. We actually use iron oxide. In fact, the version that we're making, we use it to clean up other pollutants like arsenic and things like that in other water treatment facilities and things. We use it for artist pigments. We use it to color concrete, for ceramics. It is a huge part of our industry in this country. Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm hoping people get the scope of the potential here. Now, the other thing that you left me with is that, and then we'll get into the deep dive, but you're right on the verge of cracking this code. I mean, you
Yes.
are. Tell us exactly where you are in this project. Back from where I first started you with a little 40 by 40 patch on the side of a stream. Now, where are you at?
Yes. So Professor Riefler and I hooked up with our awesome third member of the squad, which is environmentalist Michelle Shively. She is with Rural Action, and she is the Sunday Creek Watershed Coordinator, which is the creek that's polluted that we're trying to treat, right? So she came on board several years ago, and the three of us together, we basically went from 5-gallon buckets and bringing them back to the lab and testing them in like 2010, 2012, 2015, when you met us. And then we got our little, as you mentioned, our little plot, tiny test plant built in 2017, where we were doing just 1,000-gallon batches at a time, right? We went from that stages because of Michelle's amazing communication skills and her connections to all this, in this region and everything. We started partnering with Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And those folks these are a group of just amazing, dedicated people. And together, all of us figured out how we could talk about this and shape it in such a way that we could go after major funding, right? And so with the help of Ohio Department of Natural Resources and Michelle Shively and Rural Action and Ohio University, and it's a big team of people, we were able in 2019 to get about $3 million in AMLR funding to begin preparation to build our full-scale treatment plant at this worst site in Ohio, right? And what happened in that collaboration at that time in 2019 is that Michelle and Rural Action, they were able to find an anonymous donor who purchased the land around the seep so that we could have it. 38 acres. And it was disused farmland, right? They just did brome, mowing like once a year. And then there were some houses there, and that's a long conversation for another time. But essentially, so we got that, and then we used that money to prepare that land. So right now we have all of this acreage that has a plateau built at top where we will build our plant. So it's raised up out of the flood level. And then it scopes down into a big lower section that's about 16 acres, maybe a little more. And that lower section is going to be a wetland where all the water we're treating in the plant will flow down through the wetland in a very circuitous little route, And we can talk about the wetland later. But so where we're at now is that allowed us to have ODNR go to bat for us with Biden's infrastructure money. And what we got from there is we're actually able to get $3.6 million a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, about something like that. And so right now we have been working for the last year in collaboration with AECOM, a large consulting engineering firm. And they have been helping us figure out how do you take something that's 5-gallon buckets and make it work in million-gallon containers, right? It's stunning. And so we are at the phase right now where by May of this coming year, May of 2025, we will have a full biddable contract that we just take and we say, look, this is every nut and bolt. This is how the plant comes together. This is exactly how much it's going to cost. These are contractors that can do the work. Can we have our capital costs, please? And at that point, if they say yes, because everybody's invested in this.
Who's they?
Then they is like, it's infrastructure money through state, federal money through Ohio Department of Natural Resources.
Okay.
Yep.
Who presumably is already on board or very much in the know.
They're on board. Mm-hmm. They're on board. They are, yes. Without them, we wouldn't, again, they're just awesome people, and we wouldn't be where we're at without them, because they, yes, are the people that say, look, this is the project we're funding. We're going to ask to funnel funds here.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're right on the precipice of actually putting a building on the site and doing it.
Yeah. It'll be a full treatment plant. Absolutely.
That's just crazy. That is so okay. So we're going to take a break, and we come back. Yep. We're going to talk about this process that John has been involved in of seeing a problem and solving it, and the patience it took, and the recognizing what your role is and what it isn't. And there's so much. Oh, I just got goosebumps that John can share with us. If you're looking at a problem, large or small, in your community or your neighborhood or your town, and you like John, just see a natural place from A to Z, but you don't know quite how to get there, we're going to talk about how John found his way along. And I'm sure this episode can be a great help to anybody who's out there. John, I have to say, are you aware of this great podcast called How I Built This?
I love How I Built This.
Okay.
Guy Raz, yes.
Yes, it's just one of my favorite. But of course, those are all the people who made it, who made millions of dollars, and that's why Guy ends up talking to them. Well, I kind of look at the Goodness Exchange and the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast, the podcast for those that are in the process of making it, not necessarily to a state of money and wealth, but to a state of change the world, change the future for so many. So
Gotcha.
you're just right in that dream zone for all of us. So thank you for staying with it. We'll be back in a minute, and we'll talk to John about how we can all learn from his experience and do what needs to be done in our own areas. You know how the constant negative noise in our digital lives feels like it's reaching a boiling point? Now, many of us have tuned out the news and social media almost entirely. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. There are newsworthy stories about amazing progress, innovation, leaps in human potential, and wonders in the natural world, and they're just not reaching the top of our feeds. We can have access to this, but none of us has the time or maybe even the emotional stamina to search through all the doom and gloom news to find what's right with the world. Okay, enter the Goodness Exchange. There, we are giving instant access to positive news for curious people. Did you hear about the recent Harvard study that found that exposure to just 4 minutes of good news can make you 32% less anxious and 18% more optimistic? Well, I don't know about you, but I need those kind of numbers in my life. So if you want to live with more joy and way less fear, it's really simple. First, you join us at the Goodness Exchange. Everyone around the world has the opportunity to access this kind of content. And we've promised no politics for about a decade, so you're safe from all that distraction as well. Second, you allow this new, more positive, balanced worldview to put a spring in your step again. It can change the way you react to your kids, your coworkers, everybody you come in contact with. And the stories we write about can make you the idea person in your circles. These challenging times call for us to wake up and take control of our perspective. The people who use the Goodness Exchange have the ability to react to the harshness of the world much different because they know way more about what's right with the world. And that's a resource. So subscribe to the Goodness Exchange, our YouTube channel and the podcast, and use this content to live a more expansive worldview. It is still an amazing world out there, and you can be a part of it. Welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness. Okay, we're back with John Sabraw. He's an artist at Ohio University. He has this extraordinary serendipitous story of discovering that he had the same recognition of a problem and a possible solution as somebody from the environmental engineering department, his now longtime collaborator in his pollution to paint project. And I'm going to kind of change the angle here just a little bit and make sure John shares enough of the process they've been through so that anybody who might be listening to this can get some pearls about how to go about looking into the problems they see possible solutions for right where they are. Because that's how everything starts, John. Every innovator I've ever interviewed, you know, they didn't go and off and solve a problem in Timbuktu. They passed by something every day right where they were. And finally, one day, they just said, I guess something's got to start with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in our pre-call, one of the things you said to me was, I still think that my role is to be the crazy person with a good idea. And I threw my ideas out there, and I don't transfer my frustration to my team when it doesn't happen fast enough. This is something I've struggled with through the whole journey of the Goodness Exchange for 11 years. When things didn't happen enough, I had to fight the urge to transfer that frustration to my team. Talk to us about patience and change over the arc of time.
I think I remember talking to you about that, and it's a learned skill. Let me be clear on that. I didn't start the project with massive, amazing patience and skills. It's something that I adopted along the way through necessity. Behind me here is my studio, right? And this is my new space, Linda. You haven't even seen my new space. I'll give you a tour when it's done. It's not done yet, but it's my new space. And so if I'm like, wow, I really want to take this iron oxide and I want to go make a big painting that has like half blue and half orange and all this stuff on it, I can just go make it. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does work. But I can just go make it. I'm in control of this space. I'm in control of that artistic, process. When you're collaborating with people who have a different set of expertise, when you are working in an environment where you have to go meet entities where they are, in this case, say state bureaucracies, policy procedures. Oftentimes the university has a lot of things that are in place. The engineering school works differently than the art school, all those kinds of things. So early on, as I would have mad ideas about things and be like, let's just do this, which is my natural state of being, is like, let's just do it anyway. Knowing it would probably fail, but we'll do it anyway. Even just getting to the doing, that's a process. And that's a process where it's like, well, are you going to be available next week? If we get this much pollution and we bring it and process it in the lab, can we get this much pigment out of it? If we do that, can we get the grad students lined up to do that? Do we have enough funding to get that next thing done, right? So that's just one kind of like small example of how I would run into that. And then I've got to communicate with several different people and entities to move to the next phase. It's not something I can snap my fingers and do with on my own, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so that yeah, go ahead.
And so, I mean, that's where we are on almost every effort anybody's ever started, is that it looks so simple to us, A to Z, from where we sit. But then there's all this other collaboration that has to happen through a group. And people do succeed in groups. Behind every Nobel Prize winner are 100 tired people. So that's the first thing that I learned that too, is that, man, it's not just as easy as you think. And if you start out with just that sort of dogged determination with a dose of low expectations, what do you think about that?
I think there's a beauty in madness. And I think that, like, honestly, I want to make sure that even though I'm communicating about this level of patience and the learned skill set of working patiently in collaborations and things like that, right? And allocating people their space and understanding when you need to let that go, or you need to just let it happen on a different timeline. Those are things that I've learned over more than a decade. So weaved in through all that is that I never stopped for a minute saying my next idea out loud, even if it wasn't going to get got to that week or that month or that year. And so I do think that I want people to feel validated, and I want to personally give them permission to very respectfully lay out your most mad idea as a solution or a way forward, with the caveat that it might drop flat for a while and you might have to be real quiet about it for a while, and come back. I just want to make sure that I don't want to miscommunicate, my Zia guys,
Yeah, no, it's very, very true. Now, there's kind of a synergy that has to happen too, like you described, in finding these other good people who were already in a similar mindset, but probably had to organize their own systems to match up with you well, right? Like, they were probably darn glad you came along, but then there was that, right? Like, there's stories here.
Yeah. I've had a lot of people who've approached me to collaborate, and it's, you don't expect every approach for collaboration to work. You're right. People, you gotta vibe, right? Doesn't mean you're the same person or anything at all, but you got a vibe. And so that was, I think, a real benefit of Professor Feefle, myself, and Michelle was like, forget about it. Everybody loves Michelle. She's like just awesome. And so there is an understanding, I think, from all three of us that, like, we're not going to give up on this because of a small roadblock. and we're going to come with creative things. So if you know that about your collaborator, if you feel that coming off of your collaborators, it's a lot easier to have patience. It just is, you know? I've had to learn to recognize that even though I feel holistically generous and excited and welcoming in laying out my crazy ideas, that is not necessarily how people receive them, because people are very different than me. And so that is something that I've learned, that I don't tamp down my ideas. I'm going to lay it out. But what I do is then that frustration I spoke about is that I lay it out there and then I just watch the landscape and I just, okay, what happens? Do they respond? Are they quiet? I'll give you an example. So years ago, when we first got that first batch of money, and actually I should say that when you met me, we had been denied from just about everybody. We were really not getting funding from anybody. And that was for a number of reasons, including we were doing what's considered applied and research, right? A pure research and pure application. We were doing both at one time. And a lot of funding places were like, we don't know why would you do that? We don't know what that is, right? Other things that happened is that people didn't believe us. They thought it was too crazy of an idea, right? This is not going to work. We're not going to fund you, et cetera, right?
Almost too good to be true, John, in some ways.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people think that is madness, right?
Right.
Like it couldn't possibly work. That's too idealistic. Move along, right? So once we got Sugarbush Foundation was an incredible organization that continues to fund us to this day. Every year they give us, a good amount of money, and that's helped us bring graduate students on board, et cetera, other things. But there's two ways that the craziness happened. One is that when we didn't have any funding, we were denied funding, I went out to Gamblin' Artist Colors in Portland, Oregon. I didn't tell them I was coming. And I'm not recommending this to everybody, but I happened to, in grad school, make my rent by working at an art supply store where I had met Robert Gamblin, the founder of Gamblin' Artist Colors, And so we had bonded a bit. Yeah, he would come through and he would be his company was very young and very new. And he was so excited about pigments and colors and things. And I was excited about it. So once a year or so he would pop in and I'd be like, yeah, and this is for a couple of years. So I had this faraway hope that I don't know if my name would be recognized or anything. It'd been many years since we connected or something else. And so I actually just went there. I happened to be taking my family for a little trip out west. And I was like, listen, y'all just hang out in this museum. I got to go do something. Dad's got to go do something. I drove to Gamblin Factory and I walked in and I was like, hey guys, my name is John Sabraw and I'm out here in Ohio. And the poor receptionist in the little anteroom to the factory, she was rightfully a little bit probably sketched out by me. And so she said, nobody can meet with you. And I was pretty insistent, tried to be cool about it. I probably wasn't very cool about it. And I tried to be insistent. And then she was like, oh, well, and then a couple of phone calls and she goes, okay, our plant manager, Scott, can come out and talk to you, but you have to stay here. He's only got 2 minutes. And that's all. So Scott Gelati, the plant manager at the time, comes out. And I left 3 hours later with an agreement for them to test our pigments with their independent labs and test in their factories. Yeah. Right. Wow. So that's a case where I knew Robert cared about pigments. I knew he cared about artists. I knew he cared about quality. And I knew that being an Oregon guy and out there, that I knew that they were really pushing sustainability in their own products and how they were generating them, all that. So I thought it was a good fit, but you take the crazy leap and you go out there and you say it, right? And it worked. Once Gamblin was on board, that gave our funders permission. Then we got funding. And so once we got that initial funding that came in, and like I said, we got that, $3.2 million to come in and actually start preparing the land to build the plant. That was the wetland that we had to put in there. So I was in a room with all the state engineers and all the people here, and it was about maybe 15 people in this room kind of talking about what we're going to do, with the property. And I just usually stay quiet in those meetings, because I'm just the art guy.
That reminds me of a story that you told that I thought was interesting. It is all about, okay, I could go all over the place here.
Nope.
Have you ever seen this great video? It's on YouTube. I just put a link to it in our weekly newsletter. It's the guy who starts dancing crazily on a hillside at a concert. And he's dancing by himself, right? And then the next guy comes in and joins him. Well, there's this amazing thought leader who does this little narration, not over the top of the original video. And he makes a point that it's not necessarily the guy dancing alone in the shirtless guy dancing wildly, who is the real inspiration. It's the second guy. It's the guy who comes along and validates what the first guy is doing. And
Yeah.
I think that's in the story that you just told. It's so important that any of us who maybe can't participate in the actual solving of a problem can be the person who validates, who makes the introduction, who has the connection for a person like you to get to that first person that validates the idea. You told a great story. Please share it with us in a similar light about a 3D sculpture garden that you saw go through that.
Okay. So yeah, actually, it's a great segue. Thank you for that. So I'm in this meeting. I don't know. It's like I don't know what it is. It's like 2018, 2019 or something like that. We're talking about the fact that we have to have a wetland and we have the plant's going to go here, the wetland's going to go here and all that. And then I said, what does the wetland have to be? Because I don't know anything about wetlands, you know? And they said, well, it's, we just put seeds down there and then it does this thing and, the water goes through it. And I was like, what if the wetland had walking paths? Like, could we make walking paths and people can like walk through it and look at the native plants and stuff like that? And they were like, yeah. I was like, and what if it was a public sculpture garden? And since the wetland's going to flood, it would flood the sculptures too. And that kind of stuff. Dead quiet, absolute dead quiet in the room. These are engineers. These are people that say, and it was just like dead quiet. And they all kind of said like, well, maybe you could just like, maybe you can think about that, and it was all real quiet and stuff. That was years ago. So every year since, I've actually brought some students in and said, let's imagine a wetland where you like I always say, drone-worthy wetland. Like you drone over and you're like, yeah, that's the coolest wetland ever, right? And then I'd take those drawings and then we'd take it to the state engineer, Ron, who's just the most awesome guy. And he'd be like, well, I don't think we can do that. And then he would do engineer drawings and change it. But he feels really bad about sort of crushing my art dreams. So whenever he sends me a drawing back that's an engineer's drawing of a wetland, he always gives me a little sweet note in it. Like he put this little thing in there and he wrote to the side like John's Archipelago, and he's an awesome guy. He's a great, great guy. And so basically this has kind of become now the norm. Now I'm working with a team of wetland experts with this consulting company, and we are designing the craziest looking wetland that is half leaf and half fish from a drone shot. And then there's this other amazing engineering professor here, Jason Tremley. Turns out he's taking coal mine waste, not the pollution, but slag piles of coal that's left over. He's found a way to pulverize that into a powder, combine that with other ingredients, and basically make housing products that are more fireproof than wood, that are sustainable, and that can be recycled. And I'm like, bro, this is great. And so he is getting this big grant from the Department of Energy to do the stuff. And with that, he's buying an industrial-sized 3D printer to 3D print this material out. And he was like, is there some kind of public commons good thing we could do out of this? And I was like, as a matter of fact, there is. And so I just got a grant about 3 months ago. I'm working with Jason, and we are actually going to add our pigments from the pollution and his coal from the coal slag piles. And we're going to make 3D filament, and artists around the world can send me a sketch on a napkin that they did in the bar the night before, and me and my grad students will generate a 3D digital model of their idea. We'll 3D print it, we'll send it to them and go is this what you had in mind when you were at the bar? And maybe they don't remember it, but maybe they do. And they'll look at it and go this is pretty decent. And then we print a full-size one and we put it in the wetland.
Oh my gosh.
Is that not cool? It's so cool.
That is... I don't know. This could be my very favorite episode of the podcast. Because I tell you, and it's what other people need to hear, John. Again, tearing up. We need to know that there are projects and people just like you all over the world who have an idea, who realize that the potential of what they know is possible is worth fighting for, and who stay with it and stay with it and stay with it, no matter the chips are down. And then they never miss an opportunity to follow some serendipity. Like I've heard you mention twice, the fact that you knew that pigment guy, and the fact that the grad student introduced you to your colleague, and then the third. Okay, so this is just incredible, absolutely incredible, and we get art.
Yeah.
I was just going to offer. I do gigantic metal sculptures. I'm a welder. I'm not sure if I ever shared that with you. So, in a later email, I'll put some pictures of the stuff
Please
my daughter and I
yeah.
do. I was almost going to offer to do a big sculpture for the wetland, but you sound like you've got that covered.
I don't know, Linda. We'll see.
Okay, all right.
So let's stay in conversation about that.
Okay, all right. So something that we've kind of ran around and through here is this. Okay, I think the people with the ideas are going to look crazy to other people. It's just the way ideas work, but we can't finish. We can't get things across the finish line. As with the artist mind, we need the linear minds.
Yeah.
So talk to us about what you've experienced with the collaboration of the artist mind and the linear mind, because it sounds like that's what you got in the environmental engineer and the gal from the environmental agency.
Yeah. This is one of the, I think, most life-affirming things that I've done is the realization that I don't have to know it all and I don't have to do it all. And I can't. And I think that early on, I really saw myself as someone, I never had the thought that someone else would actually want to put all of their expertise in with mine. You know what I mean? You're kind of out there and you have an idea and you're like, oh, if I don't do this, no one's going to do this. And like, I'm crazy, so I'll just try to do it anyway. And I don't have the skill sets to do all that. I'm an art guy. So Professor Feefle, he's really interested in art, but it's not his thing. He's a person who likes to put puzzles together in a way that they can be replicated and they become something solid and reliable, right? So what he does is I'm like, well, let's do something crazy. And he's like, I'm going to let you do that for a minute because I want to see what happens too. This is after a period of time we got to know each other. But after that, then he's like, okay, but here's how we got to bring it in. And if we can't get this to do this or this or this, then that's going to lead to this issue or it's not going to lead here. And I'll be like, okay. And see, I don't have to hold that in my head. He does that. He's an expert at it. He's great at it. He thinks that way, which is awesome. Michelle Shively, I'm like, well, Michelle, I want to do this and I want to do these things. And she's like, okay, yeah, but you know what? These people live here and they do this, and this other company is doing this. I know this guy in Pennsylvania is doing that. So if we connected this to this to this, this is how that could work. And then that would be something that people would understand better, and we could get more people, more communities on board to have buy-in. And I'm like, oh, because I don't know all those things. She does. This is what collaboration is about. And again, it's relieving to me,
It's the way humans succeed. Humans succeed in groups. That's all there is to it. Yeah. When I see an influencer, taking credit, that world of individual success is usually pretty false. It's always about our finding our way into collaborations with people who don't think like us. Yeah. To me, this movement of diversity and inclusion is just the natural outcome of a world that needs all minds on deck.
Yeah.
And you've got thank you, Michelle and Dr. Feefle, for being the kind of perhaps linear thinkers who would be open enough to listen to the crazy ideas of an artist's mind who can imagine almost anything.
Yeah.
Because we need them both. We need both kinds of minds. Badly.
I think we need us embedded. I think that there's a real, well, I want to respect everyone's time and not do, 76 podcasts in one. But I think that the way that we have split off ways of thinking and expertise into micro tribes, I don't think that's helping anyone.
No.
Just don't.
No. We got to get curious, and that may be the great character strength that each of the three of you had was curiosity, right? Yeah. You can be however you are in this world, and be 10 times more successful, or maybe thousands of times more successful, if you're curious about the story and the knowledge of others, right? And the experience.
Well, and that curiosity, incidentally, I think that it also contains within it resilience because, as you're curious and you're like, here's a crazy idea, or I wonder if this would work or something else, those people aren't curious once. They're always curious. And you don't stay always curious unless you have some resilience to like, well, that was a dumb idea, or wow, I looked really ridiculous in that group of people. But like the fifth idea you lay out there might be the one that works, the 20th, and that's a certain amount of resilience. There's the other side of it too, when you can just be like so unself-aware that you're like just, you don't have that kind of reanalysis, which is really important. But by and large, Michelle, Guy, Ron, Gabe, they're people who are, yes, you're right, continuously curious in very different ways. And it just doesn't stop them when something hits a wall. It doesn't stop them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's how we're going to get most of the solutions we need in this world across the finish line, with exactly the kind of lovely collaboration and curiosity and courage that we've talked about for the last hour. I can't thank you enough, John Sabraw. I was pronouncing it wrong right from the beginning, my whole life that I've known you. So, John, I always ask people a couple of final questions in these interviews to make sure we get one last shot at some of your best insights and we can connect with helping. So the first question is, what do you wish people knew? Sometimes when you look at the news and your head is in your hands and you just think, oh my God, like what has this whole adventure taught you? What do you really wish people knew?
This is going to sound probably pretty Hallmark Christmas movie-ish, but I'll explain myself. I'm glad you mentioned the media because I've had my own run-ins with the media, some good, some bad. And I think that by and large, where we receive, and this is interesting about your website and your newscast. I mean, I think it's something very good because by and large, how we receive information about our environment, about sustainability, about climate change, all the things that when we receive that, we always receive it as something that's like, it's spoken about as if it's an isolated thing, which it's not, and that it's got so much heavy negativeness to it that it's something that's a dreaded problem, intractable, awful. And even there's a kind of a solution to it. They don't tend to talk about the solution as if it's like a great thing. They're like, well, this might work, but remember, it's all bad, right? And here's the thing that I had no idea about until I've been working on this project and until I was working in it long enough to have a little self-reflection about it, right? This is something I want everyone who's listening to this podcast to understand from my experience, is that the work of trying to solve these issues is fun and joyous. I'm sorry. The media's wrong. It is so much fun. You meet all kinds of people. You go out, you have adventures. You freaking like, you laugh. You're like joking. You get dirty. You have to do laundry and then you go get beers with people. It is what humans are about. It is the best part of us. This whole cast of this whole climate, sustainability, societal issues thing as this giant overhanging piece of granite that's going to crush us. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It is the most fun I've had my whole freaking life.
That is a remarkable perspective that I am going to make sure we make a clip about and put it on the Goodness Exchange YouTube channel. And cool. I am going to personally watch it probably daily to remind me. That's exactly what I think. Sometimes I got to say, John, I talk to people who are solving some really big, heavy problems in this world. And I have so much fun doing this that my face has become kind of heart-shaped, like the Who's from Whoville. Because look at it. It does. Because I smile so much more than I used to.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, this is why people have to work to control their worldview. This is my message. I know I'm jumping in here on John's train, but it follows right with what he just said. We have to care as much about our worldview as we do about our abs.
Yeah.
Think of the time and energy people are putting into their abs.
Yeah.
But our worldview is just so important. And exactly what John said, the people who are out there doing good things in our world, they're energized and they're fun. And
if if you go out there, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you go out there and you want to get involved and you go to try to get involved and it's not that fun, go to the next thing. Go to the next one. Because one of them is going to match up and you're going to be like, oh, this is what they're talking about. Just go do it, please. Just go do it. We need you to go do it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have goosebumps for the 10th time in this interview. Thank you so much. That's exactly the thought I would love to leave people with every single day. You've nailed it. Last thing is, what can we do to help? Because this is, you can't get people all fired up about things and not give them somewhere to go, something to do next. And it's okay to say, we just need funding. Connect with somebody who might want to know more about this idea. What can people do to help, John?
Thank you for that. That is a really generous question to end the podcast with. And it is kind of dumb. It is like money, right? I think there's a couple of ways where it's often easier with the scale of the project to have that find its attachment to federal money and state money. But for those of us who are here, we're not being paid to do this. This is like in addition to everything we do, right? In addition to teaching 500 students a year and running 2 programs and having a family. So what can help is that, where Michelle Shively is at, that's a place called Rural Action. You can go onto Rural Action, you can donate money, and that helps her. She can pay for assistance, she can do other things, right? At Ohio University. And we can put I don't know if you have a link place we can put these links.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I don't want to interrupt you. I'm going to give people a way to connect with all this at the end. Keep going.
Cool. No, that's good. And I have a fund that someone helped me set up here at the university. It's called the John Sabraw Fund for Arts and Innovation. That fund, that allows us to pay for students to come out and work at the SEEP, to rent vans to go out there, for me to frankly ship artwork in places and ship pigments to places. It's so helpful just to have a little bit of money that I get to do the nice things for the immediate people around me. That's glorious. But there's one other thing that people can do. And you know what's coming. And it's vote. Vote in November. Get it out there. I can tell you right now that I don't know anything about you that's listening, and I don't need to. But I can tell you this. If you care about your environment, if you care about sustainability, if you care about climate change, then you've got to choose the candidate that is not denying that those things exist. And the reason to do it in the place that we're at now, I know that a lot of people are upset that perhaps their ideal candidate isn't on the docket somewhere, right? I understand that. But all the years that I've been doing this project and all the people that I've met, the ideal is a fallacy. It's ridiculous. It's about putting work on the ground. There's a great book that just came out from Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. What if we get it right?
Oh, I just sent an email to try and interview her.
Oh,
yes.
If you interview her, can I come on and interview with her? Because I am such a fanboy. And she has this great notion that I've learned is true, which is that what if we did it 40%? What if we did it 60%? Well, my gosh, it's better than 0. And that's not ideal, but it is something that works. So in terms of voting, if we have somebody who's 40% right, the rest of us have the power as individuals and as this collective group of people that can talk to each other. We can actually pressurize that person who is 40% of the way there to get 60, 70, 80% of the way there. If there's no there, if we've got someone who denies it exists at all, we don't have that opportunity. So let's all band together. Let's make sure we have the opportunity to come together collectively and to make the change that we need,
Right. Lovely. Very well said. Very well said. Okay. So John has said so many things that are important today and introduced us to so many concepts and people and books and I'm going to try and get Ayan on this podcast for sure. I'm going to remind people that if you get your podcasts, Spotify or whatever, you're missing a very large chunk of the information and good next steps and connections that you can get from these interviews at the Goodness Exchange on the podcast website. So if you just type in Conspiracy of Goodness Podcast, you're going to be actually on a giant global good news website called the Goodness Exchange. And there will be an article, a full article about John Sabraw's work and the pollution to pigments and all this. And we will include every single link that you and I talked about there so people can go easily to what's next. Cool. And I want to make sure I'm going to put links to whatever you tell me to do so folks can connect with your colleagues too. These are the folks who are changing our shared future and we need to be able to support them in any way that we can. So I'm going to make sure that all that sort of thing is in the article on the Goodness Exchange about this episode.
Cool.
Okay,
Cool.
John, it's been a pleasure. We're going to keep track of this project. Let's not let 8 years pass by again.
We will not. Absolutely not.
And I hope that things go so fast that we'll need to do something especially important in another year.
Gosh, me too.
Okay, I know it's been a long haul. Thank you for staying in there with us. Thank you for joining us at the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast. It is still an amazing world out there. And join us in this conspiracy to make the world a better place. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.